Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star one on your phone to ask a question. I would like to inform all parties that today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Bettina Enclon. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's media teleconference. I'm Bettina Enclon in NASA's Office of Communications. Since being called by the President to accelerate our return to the moon and naming our modern lunar exploration program Artemis, we're only 4 short years away from sending the first woman and next man to the surface of the moon. We're here to discuss the program, the progress we've made to date with our lunar program, as well as the important next steps in science, technology, and human exploration that will see us achieve our bold Artemis goals and push us beyond the moon to send the first astronauts to Mars. Earlier today, NASA released its written Artemis plan. To talk more about our Artemis program, we have NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine, Kathy Leaders, Associate Administrator for Human Exploration, Jim Reuter, Associate Administrator for Technology, Thomas Zurbuchen, Associate Administrator for Science. We will begin with opening comments from our speakers and then open it up for questions. To ensure as many people as possible get the opportunity to ask their question, please ask only one question per person. Please do state your name, affiliation, and to whom you're directing a question. Now let's begin with NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine.
Well, thank you, Bettina, and thank you to all of the folks who have joined us today on this phone call. And I hope you had a chance to read our Artemis plan. I think it's a solid outline of what we will accomplish in the coming years as part of Artemis. NASA has all the key systems and contracts in place to ensure that we are meeting the President's ambitious goal to return American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972. And I think it's important to recognize that we have strong bipartisan consensus on this effort. The human landing system is currently funded, again, for the first time since 1972. We have a number of contracts that are already in place to achieve the landing by 2024, and we're moving rapidly to achieve that. Of course, a lot of things are happening for that 2024 moon landing, to include modernization of the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. Of course, our space launch system is underway right now. The green run is underway right now, and of course, we're going to have a hot fire here in just a matter of weeks. The Orion spacecraft is complete, along with its European service module. We've got the commercial human landing systems, which I just mentioned, are funded and under contract right now. The Gateway is under development, and we've got the next generation spacesuits. So all of the elements that we need for a successful 2024 moon landing are underway, and we're moving rapidly to achieve that goal. The Artemis plan that we released today is largely focused on phase 1, which culminates in a landing of the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024, of course, as well as bringing them home safely. Our long-term lunar goal includes establishing the first sustainable presence on and around the moon by the end of the decade. So phase 1 is all about getting to the moon quickly, and we go quickly to retire as much as possible a lot of the political risk from programs that take too long and cost too much. So we're going quickly. But we're also not missing, the big picture, which is we're going to the moon to stay. So we're building a sustainable program for the end of the decade. In order to achieve this, of course, it's going to require an all-of-NASA approach. And, of course, on the phone, we've got the Space Technology Mission Directorate, we've got the Science Mission Directorate, the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. But it's going to require an all-of-NASA approach. And, of course, What we've learned recently about the science on the moon is quite stunning. The fact that there was rust on the moon, of course, and so many other new discoveries within the last 10 years, the water ice, volatiles for life support, air to breathe, water to drink, and in fact, rocket fuel, which is, of course, the hydrogen in hundreds of millions of tons on the south pole of the moon. So I think it's important to recognize that we have the Artemis plan, that we have now published it, released it to Congress, released it to the public, and we'll be happy to answer questions here in a few minutes. But for now, I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Leaders, the Associate Administrator in charge of Human Exploration and Operations at NASA. Kathy?
Thank you, Jim. It is really my pleasure to be here. You know, I can't believe it has been 3 months since my announcement as HEOAA. And I'm very excited that we are heading into our exciting Artemis missions campaign. You know, when I came in as HEOAA, I emphasized how exploration's a team sport, and it's also very, it's been an amazing part of me being on this team, and you'll hear from a few other members of the team as they're coming up and with what we're accomplishing across the agency. You know, right now we are getting ready for the core stage, like Jim mentioned before. It's going through its final sets of checkouts. It's what we call the wet dress, and then coming up and doing the hot fire in the next few months. But like Jim talked about, this is the last piece, the last part of the crew transportation system that will be making its way down to the Cape, where the other pieces are waiting for it. And it's going to be very exciting to see the hardware at the Cape getting ready for our uncrewed demonstration mission next fall, 2021. I think folks don't realize that mission will be over a month long, and we'll be checking out all the critical systems, and it will also be flying 17 payloads, 5 of which are international. Another example of the team sport. That mission will be buying down the risk for our next exciting mission, which will be Artemis 2, our crewed demonstration, a 10-day mission that's going to be really putting our new capability through its paces and making sure that all the critical systems are working, and doing checkouts on the demonstration mission, including doing a prox operations checkout. The team right now is getting all the pieces of that vehicle ready to go fly and be ready for that mission in 2023. And all that work then gets us ready for Artemis 3, which, as Jim was saying before, will be bringing together our proven crew transportation system and our new human landers. Our human landing system program has been hitting every single milestone in their path for bringing the first woman and the next man on the moon by 2024. So we are in the process right now of waiting to get the final solutions from our different providers and moving towards our final awards for the providers next spring. We continue to work and collaborate across our NASA directorates, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Jim Reuter will be saying out of the STMD. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, and thank you, Jim. You know, we like to say that technology drives exploration, and that's true here on Earth and in space. And I'm really excited as well to be part of this Artemis plan. We need to know how to precisely land on the moon, to mine and process resources, including water at the South Pole, build structures in the harsh environment of space out of local resources, power surface operations, and manage things like that pesky lunar dust. We're maturing these technology areas and more, being our Lunar Surface Innovation Initiative. Our space tech team continues to develop and demonstrate the technologies identified in this plan to land, work, and live sustainably on the moon for the Artemis program. A couple examples. Via the NASA Tipping Point Partnership, we're working with Blue Origin to demonstrate precision landing technologies to enable exact and soft landings on the moon. A NASA-developed precision landing technology suite will be tested on board New Shepard very soon. Just stay tuned for news on that. The flight path for the suborbital launch is relevant to lunar landings and will provide NASA a unique opportunity to mature sensors and algorithms for potential use on Artemis missions. And then in early 2021, we will be launching a CubeSat to the same cislunar orbit and in front of the orbit targeted for the Gateway. The Capstone CubeSat, which stands for Cislunar Autonomous Positioning System, Technology Operations, and Navigation Experiment, represents a rapid, low-cost lunar flight demo. These are just a couple examples of technologies we're demonstrating in the near future. And of course, what we're doing is we're planning to send dozens more technology experiments, including new spectrometers and regolith drills, to the surface of the moon on a commercial moon delivery initiative led by our science colleagues. But I don't want to steal Thomas's thunder, so I'll turn over to Thomas to talk to him a little bit more about that. Thomas is the Associate Administrator for Science Mission Directorate. Thomas?
Hey, Jim, thanks so much. And Kathy, couldn't be more excited to have you on board. It's great to be here. And as Jim Bridenstine said earlier, is going to the moon involves the science community, both within the United States and globally. It's truly an exciting time to be part of this new future we are building together. And in science, we're helping to lead. Even with all we've learned and continue to learn about the moon, through the samples returned by Apollo astronauts and data from our satellites, like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, the moon still holds many science mysteries and opportunities. The moon is, frankly, a cornerstone for understanding our solar system, especially measuring its absolute age. We can also learn about how the sun has changed over time, especially the high-energy particle output of the sun, and about the history of our planet, and use the moon as a platform for unique scientific observations, even looking back in time to the early phase of the universe. Jim Bridenstine briefly mentioned our Commercial Lunar Payload Services initiatives, CLIPS. We highlight it in the plan as well, and it's an innovative new paradigm to support our lunar return through delivery services from industry. Ahead of the human return, we're working with American companies to robotically land on the moon up to 8 times through 2024. We're going to continue sending 2 deliveries to the surface of the moon each year, beginning next year through 28. International and commercial partners are getting excited about these lunar deliveries by U.S. companies as well, and the market is growing, which has really been one of the things that we've been looking forward to seeing as part of this very exciting experiment we're running. We've already identified many of the science and technology payloads and awarded task orders for half of those flights. In 21, Astrobotic Intuitive Machines will both launch in the fall, as well as the first 2 private American companies to demonstrate the ability to land on the moon and deliver our payloads and those of other customers. In 22, Mast and Space System will make the first delivery to the lunar pole, really starting a crescendo for the pole, of course, culminating in 24, because in 23, Astrobotic will deliver Viper to the South Pole, our water hunting and mapping robot that is so critical for us to inform ourselves about these really unique places that, as of yet, we have not seen. We also have a second task out for bid for additional technologies of the type that Jim Reuters just talked to you about. We in NASA Science will not miss any opportunity to do great science as part of the Artemis program, whether it is in small satellites of Artemis 1 that Kathy, you talked about, space weather instrumentation on Gateway, both for scientific exploration, but with our partners to pilot space weather predictions in support of astronaut safety, we're there. We also recently established a team to identify and prioritize surface science activities for crew as part of the Artemis 3 mission. We are working closely with human exploration to do that and to maximize science as well during this first week-long expedition in 24. We all look forward to and we're building towards. So yes, robotic and human exploration are going hand in hand, and together with the technology engine that Jim Reuters are talking about. We're excited about the science we will conduct on the moon and ahead of the human return and throughout this decade as part of this Artemis program. and also sending scientists back to the lunar surface and continue this amazing exploration that for many of us, we primarily know out of the history books. So with that, I think we're ready for questions, Bettina. What do you think?
Thank you, Thomas. I think we are. So thank you for all that great information from everybody. And as Thomas said, we are ready for questions. To get into the question queue, please press *1 on your phone. In about an hour after we conclude this, you can listen to a replay of this teleconference by dialing 1-800-348-3532 and using the passcode 102120. So for now, with that, we're going to take our first question. Operator, can you please put in our first question for our reporter?
The first question is from Irene Klotz from Aviation Week. Your line is now open.
Thanks very much. So my question, I think, is for Jim. Was trying doing a little multitasking while you all were talking, and it looks like the Phase 1 budget request overall is going to be nearly $28 billion. Can you just address the likelihood of getting that kind of funding with all the other things going on, and also the potential impacts right off the bat if NASA, like the rest of the government, goes into a continuing resolution for, I guess it'll be starting next week?
Yeah, absolutely, Irene. Thank you for the question. First of all, the $28 billion, that represents the costs that are associated for the next 4 years in the Artemis program to land on the moon by 2024. So SLS funding, Orion funding, the human landing system, and of course, the spacesuits, all of those things that are part of the Artemis program are included in that $28 billion. As far as getting the funding necessary to achieve the 2024 landing, I will tell you right now, we are excited about the fact that we, for the first time since 1972, are in fact funded for a human landing system. That has never happened since 1972. We've got 3 separate providers under contract to help us develop that landing system that will land on the moon by 2024. The budget request that we have before the House and the Senate right now includes a $3.2 billion for 2021 for the human landing system. It is critically important that we get that $3.2 billion. The bill that passed the House of Representatives for the appropriations, that bill had $600 million for a human landing system. So I want to be clear. Number one, we are exceptionally grateful to the House of Representatives that in a bipartisan way they have determined that funding a human landing system is important, and that's what that $600 million represents. It is also true that that we are asking for the full $3.2 billion, and what I anticipate will happen is that there will be a short-term CR before October 1st. That short-term CR would expire sometime maybe before Christmas, at which point there will be some kind of omnibus appropriation bill. Our request is today, as it always has been, which is we need that $3.2 billion for the human landing system. And I think that if we can have that done before Christmas, we're still on track for a 2024 moon landing. We have also seen these kind of continuing resolutions go, a short-term CR that it's supposed to expire, before the end of the year, turns into another CR that expires, in March. If we go to March without the $3.2 billion, it becomes more difficult. I would argue that we're still within the realm of possibility because we do have our work underway right now. If we go beyond March and we still don't have the human landing system funded, it becomes increasingly more difficult. So our request is, and we want this to be a bipartisan a bipartisan effort, which we have had a lot of success in achieving. We would like to see the $3.2 billion for the human landing system funded at the earliest possible opportunity. And the best we can see that happening right now would be with an omnibus appropriations bill sometime, before the end of the year. So that's where we are on that, Irene. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Sorry, yes, operator, next question.
The next question is from Stephen Clark from Space Flight Now. Your line is now open.
Hi, this is Stephen Clark from Space Flight Now. Thanks for taking my question. Mine's for Administrator Bridenstine. Last week you hinted that NASA might look at equatorial landing sites for Artemis, perhaps even Artemis 3, even mentioning the possibility of going back to an Apollo site. Is that being discussed or traded within NASA right now? And if so, what's the motivation for doing so? Or do you foresee that happening, that decision coming down the pike sometime before 2024? Thanks.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you for that question. I've seen a good bit of chatter about this in social media. To be clear, we're going to the South Pole, and there is no talk or trades or anything else about anything other than going to the South Pole at NASA. It came up in a league meeting, which is the Lunar Exploration Advisory Group. Somebody asked me about, wouldn't it be a good idea to go to an Apollo legacy site or something like that? And the way I answered, look, where we're going is the South Pole. That's where we're going. And I think I said something like, if it were to be determined that we couldn't get to the South Pole, then that would be something to look at. And from that, somebody tweeted something, and then it became a story. But no, right now we have no plans for Artemis 3 for anything other than the South Pole. And to kind of double down on that, if you look, we've got Mast and Space Systems going to the South Pole in 2022. We've got the Viper landing to do, activities at the South Pole to include characterizing the lunar water ice. And then we've got the Artemis 3 landing in 2024 with humans on the South Pole. We're going to the South Pole. There's no discussion of anything other than that. I think what I did is I tacitly acknowledged that going to a historic site would be kind of cool. But that's pretty much the extent of any discussions I've been a part of.
Thank you, Jim. Operator, what is our next question?
The next question is from Eric Berger from Ars Technica. Your line is now open.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for doing this. Cassie, I think you said that you're moving toward final HLS awards next spring. Can you talk about, in an ideal world, how many of those you would carry forward? Obviously, you have 3 now. I think you may be considering a leader-follower aspect, like a prime candidate for 2024 and a follower. But maybe you could talk about, whether there will be a true down select next spring, or whether you'd like to carry all 3 forward. And then let's say you do get like $600 or $1 billion, like, would that force you to automatically go down to 1? Thanks very much.
So, the goal would be to have, in a perfect world, to have competition. We would really like to maintain competition. We've found in other commercial endeavors having somebody to be looking at and competing it against in some way, or also having redundancy in that way would be is advantageous. I think it's one of the important parts of what Jim was saying about the CR and understanding our funding is that we are getting our final proposals from each of the providers right now. And it would also be nice to be able to look at different opportunities for different financing and what that would mean for us at about the same time. So the good thing is, I think we'll have both sets of data in that February, March timeframe for us to be able to lay in our plans and strategies going forward.
And are you considering a prime for 2024 and a backup for later, or do you not have that formulated yet?
We don't have that formulated yet. We'd have to, we're really counting on looking at what each of the providers and how they're proposing their strategies too, which will also be enabled by that, right? Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Eric, for your question. Our next question will come from Marsha Dunn from AP.
Yes, hi. Probably for Mr. Bridenstine, for the commercial crew program, to put a human face on it, you picked your crew well in advance. And so I'm wondering, when will the moon crews be identified? When will you be picking? When will they be identified? And how do you plan to go about picking these people? Thank you.
Yeah, so the way NASA usually goes about picking a crew, it's usually about 2 hours, or I said 2 hours. It's usually about 2 years prior to the mission. I think it's important that that we start identifying the Artemis team earlier than that, even. Primarily because I think it will serve as a source of inspiration for a lot of people. To see the team that will be going to the moon, this time sustainably, and so I would like to announce an Artemis cadre earlier rather than later, but at this point in time we don't have those astronauts identified at this point, and we don't have any plans to make an announcement at this point.
Thank you, Marsha, for that question. Next, we'll go to Bill Harwood. Bill?
Hey, thanks, Bettina. Marsha just asked my question, so I'll pass it on. Thanks.
Well, that was fast. Thanks, Bill. Next, we're going to go to Ivan. Ivan, are you on?
Yes, thanks so much. Can you please compare Artemis 3 and Apollo 14, for instance, in terms of how much science they'll be able to do on the surface of the moon, especially if you only manage to do 2 moonwalks, which is apparently a scenario. And since you highlight cleanup in the plan, can you elaborate on what that will entail and whether that includes bringing back any waste?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you the science that we would be doing is really very different than anything we've done before. We have to remember during the Apollo era, we thought the moon was bone dry. Now we know that there's lots of water ice, and we know that it's at the South Pole. So the big thing that we want to do is we want to understand how that water ice is embedded in the regolith. We want to see if there might even be pure water ice in the cold traps. We found on Mars, we found absolutely pure water ice. And it would be interesting to see if there's something like that on the moon. And then of course trying to understand, how do we separate the regolith from the water ice? Those kind of things if it needs to be done. So really those are kind of the higher priority activities. But also we are on the South Pole of the moon, so there's going to be a lot that we learn. I mean, as I said earlier, we just learned a couple weeks ago that the moon actually has rust, which means there's got to be humidity and there's got to be oxygen, and these are things that we didn't know until just recently. So there's a lot of science to be done on the moon. I will also tell you, we go back to the Apollo era. One of the first experiments was a heliophysics experiment where we were measuring the subatomic charged particles coming from the sun. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for those kind of experiments. And then characterizing the regolith on the South Pole and seeing how the materials might be different than at the equatorial regions. So these are just some ideas and concepts. We put out for proposal from the science community what people would like to do on the South Pole. We've got a lot of great papers back. I know the Science Mission Directorate at NASA is evaluating what those different proposals are, and they'll be making a determination as to the direction that we go. So probably, Thomas, I'll turn it over to you to comment on what the direction that you think we should go from a science perspective on the South Pole of the Moon is.
I think you said many of the things that I was going to say, Jim. Let me just tell you, we're also from the science community anxiously awaiting the return of the documents that Cassie talked about, because we're interested in engaging with these providers. Remember, that's a little bit different than how it was done in the Apollo program, in which there was a single kind of government-focused, of course, with contractor-enabled, government-focused effort. We do believe that there's important science that can be done, and actually we're in the process of really looking at these things, just like Jim said, and prioritizing what is there. Without a doubt, bringing samples to terrestrial labs is one of the things we'd really like to achieve, because of all the reasons that Jim said, and then some, right? It's just really one of those precious materials kind of in our reach that we'd like to have in our labs. But there's other experiments that we're thinking about. In fact, we've entered some kind of collaborative stance with even international partners to really figure out, together with our U.S. science community, what we can what can be put at the surface. Perhaps we also leave some things behind. And Cassie, I'm going to turn over to you about bringing waste back. That's not in my bailiwick. Go ahead.
Well, I think part of one of the reasons we're doing some of these missions is to go figure out how to do them differently. And so, like Thomas was saying, we've got to go see the strategies for each of these providers and how they're planning on kind of meeting our requirement set. So, we'll be following along and evaluating and understanding what our final providers will be and how they'll be dealing with the particular challenges that we'll have going forward.
So I guess as far as the science, we haven't made a final determination as to what science we will do on Artemis 3, but I will tell you, I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about what the possibilities are. So I'll just give you some examples. We think about very low frequency, radio waves that are coming from deep space that could enable us to see, the universe in ways that we haven't even imagined before. Those very low frequency radio waves this isn't going to be for Artemis 3, but on the far side of the moon could help us understand a lot about the early universe. We think about on the optics side, the moon is an extremely stable platform. Think of it as a very stable spacecraft, which means when we think about planets that are orbiting other stars and how they can eclipse those stars, and we see the stars, dip in the amount of light that they emit. We can actually see very, very, very faint dips in that light from a stable platform on the surface of the moon. In other words, we could actually increase more rapidly our discovery of exoplanets around other stars from using simple optics on the surface of the moon in a way that you couldn't do from a spacecraft, in orbit around the Earth, just because it's not nearly as stable. So I think when you think about the heliophysics, understanding subatomic charged particles coming from the sun, when we think about and how important that is to human spaceflight in general. We've got to get really good at predicting and protecting against coronal mass ejections and solar flares. We think about the astrophysics perspective with very low frequency radio antenna and even optical sensors. And then we think about the value of the regolith itself and the water ice and the volatiles that are embedded in the regolith. I think that there's more opportunity to get more science now than there ever was on Apollo 14, for example. But the question is just, what is the amount of science we can get per dollar and maximizing that. And of course, that's what Thomas Zurbuchen and his team are going to be focused on as we come up with the experiments that we can do on the moon. And not just experiments, but the science.
Thank you all. We're going to go to our next question. It is from Jeff South, Space News.
Thanks for taking my question. I'm curious how the gateway fits into this. I know it's not particularly emphasized in the report, and it looks like that you're considering having Orion dock directly with the commercial human lander for the Artemis 3 mission. If Gateway doesn't play a big role in this first phase, is there any discussion about deferring work on the initial Gateway modules to free up resources for the other elements of Artemis and then get Gateway up after Artemis 3 for those later missions? Thanks.
So, Jeff, I'll take the first crack, and then I'll hand it over to Kathy. But we do anticipate that the power and propulsion element and Halo will be available, by 2024. And so it is definitely an option that is available to the commercial human landing system providers. And of course, they're working through kind of what their strategies are to get to the moon, even as we speak. But you're absolutely right. We're not making it a requirement, and different people can propose different ways to go about making that 2024 moon landing happen. So, Kathy, I'll turn it over to you for further comment.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, Jeff, what we're trying to do is like Jim talked about at the beginning. Obviously, we're focused on getting to the moon in 2024, but we're also focused on having a sustainable lunar architecture that allows us to go to the South Pole, but then gives us opportunities to maximize and use a multiple platforms to be able to do multiple missions going forward, because we're investing. The nation's investing in these capabilities, right? So we want to make sure that the investment in these designs can then be used to conduct multiple missions. And so having the lunar platform, orbiting platform, allows us then to have potential other flexible uses of the human landing systems going forward. And so we are keeping a sustainable portfolio going. But we'll have to, as we get our direction, our appropriations direction, we'll be laying in the plan. But right now we're charging on all cylinders right now, laying the framework for us to be able to use these new capabilities that are coming online over the next few years. A very exciting time for us.
And Jeff, as you and others are formulating your stories, I would encourage you to make sure people understand that the Gateway is critically important for the sustainable mission that we have in front of us. So we don't, we've got two efforts. One is to get to the moon by 2024. And then to be sustainable by the end of the decade, and I think the Gateway is essential to that sustainable effort, so that we can have human landing systems that are reusable, that are serviceable, and it's also important to make sure that our international partners understand the level of commitment that we have to the Gateway, because they're a key part of helping us develop the gateway, and that reduces the cost to the American taxpayer. So we're grateful to our international partners for their collaboration on the gateway. And then maybe Thomas Zurbuchen, if you could, maybe you could say a few words about how we can use the gateway for science as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you called me on this. So the first thing, of course, we already did, Jeff and others, is we started the Hermes suite, which is really space weather related suite. What's exciting about this for us is not just measuring space weather in the orbit of Gateway. By the way, it's a really interesting orbit. There's specific science we've actually never been able to do in so far, in the magnetosphere and the solar wind interaction with the terrestrial plasmas that are happening in that vicinity and beyond. The other reason, though, we're excited about this is because the integration of that instrumentation and the software that goes with it, assimilation software, really helps us pilot the use of such space weather instrumentation in assimilation sense, for times in the future when we're even more away from the Sun-Earth line, which is the only place we really have done space weather predictions is for the Earth. And so for us, really learning how to do that is really critical. As we go forward, there's more science that we know about that there's tremendous excitement in various communities about. And as we go forward, recall, of course, that biological and physical sciences is also in the Science Mission Directorate now. And I know this community is particularly interested in some of the experiments in that different space environments, really truly different than the space station, where, of course, we've had 2 decades of great experience and experimentation. So there's a tremendous interest in that, also on the inside, of course, of Gateway, as much as the outside as well, which I started with.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Keith Cowling. Keith?
This is Keith Cowling from NASAWatch.com for Jim Bridenstine. When Gateway was first announced, lunar landings were still planned for 2028, and then last year things got moved up by 4 years to 2024. Yet, after more than a year, NASA's not exactly sure, this is a follow-up to Jeff's question, what Gateway will be or will not be used for and when these things will happen, especially with regards to Artemis 3. Now, you bring the term sustainable into virtually every answer. Sustainable means different things to different people. To some, it's funding. To others, it's engineering. And right now, the House seems to think it means funding. And to others, the more you delay Gateway, the more people are wondering whether you even need it. So can you tell me when, like a date, when will you exactly have it down, plan how Artemis 3 will be done and whether yes or whether no, the Gateway will be involved?
Yeah. So again, this is an important distinction between how we're doing things now and how we've done them in the past. So in the past, NASA basically wrote the requirements and designed the capability, and then we turned to contractors to build what we had basically designed with the requirements. So what we're doing now is we're turning to industry and we're allowing them to very innovatively come up with creative solutions that are, unique. And because we've done that, we have now right now under contract 3 very distinct lunar landing systems that are widely different in their approach. And some of them, will consider using Gateway, and others maybe not so much. What we don't want to do, because look, what we're trying to do is we're trying to learn the business model that is going to work, and we've done that with commercial resupply and now commercial crew. And we think about the success that we've had with the Crew Dragon, for example, on a Falcon 9 rocket. And you've heard me say some of these things before, but it's important to note, the idea that we would have a composite overwrap pressure vessel inside of a liquid oxygen tank is not something NASA would have done on its own. The idea that we would have supercooled liquid oxygen to get more specific impulse out of a rocket is not something NASA would have done on its own. The idea that we would have 9 rocket engines on a rocket the size of a Falcon 9 is not something that NASA probably would have done on its own. The idea that you would have integrated, the launch abort system into the normal propulsion system is not something maybe NASA would have done on its own. But when you turn to a commercial provider and you say, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve, how would you go about doing this? And then they go and come up with solutions. And then NASA's job is to do basically test and validate, verify the engineering, try to make it fail, and ultimately, certify the vehicle. What we have found is that's a really good model. And so, I hear folks say, they want NASA to be prescriptive. And I'm telling you that is, we have to fight to make sure that we're not being prescriptive. Because there's going to be our goal as an agency is to be a customer, one customer of many customers. And we want numerous providers that are competing on cost and competing on innovation. It's that fundamental piece, that innovative piece, that when we design the business model that we use, that ultimately will enable this virtuous cycle of continuous improvement that will enable the sustainability piece. And yes, there it is. I'm using it again. We need to be sustainable. So I really think it would be premature for me to say how our commercial providers are going to go to the moon. I know Kathy and her team are working side by side with our commercial human landing system providers day in and day out to help refine and plan their eventual, proposals. But I think we as an agency have to fight the urge to be prescriptive with them, unless there's a reason. If there's a reason, then yes, let's go do it. But and by the way, we did that with commercial resupply and with commercial crew. When we saw problems that were not being addressed, we got very directive and prescriptive. But I don't think we're there yet for the 2024 moon landing. I don't see it being necessary at this point. Kathy, I'll let you answer and correct me on anything I might have said incorrectly.
Oh, no, I absolutely agree. It goes back to how do you leverage, right? How do you maximize? How do you multiply? And the way you do that is by allowing as much degrees of freedom possible, right? And that's what opens the aperture and brings new solutions to the table. And you're exactly right, Jim. The things you thought about, we wouldn't have done that way, but it was through us being open to new solutions that enabled new options for us to be able to accomplish our goals. And so we don't have all the answers, and we are welcoming industry to come in and help us bring answers to the big problems we have. And that's why we do what we do, is to be able to go do this and to have us all learn as we're moving to accomplish these missions. We want new ideas being brought to the table. We are open to new ideas to help us gain and be able to leverage the investment that we're making in this.
Thank you, Kathy. On this topic, talking about sustainability, I wanted to bring Jim Reuter quickly into the conversation. Jim, what does sustainability mean to technology advancements that ST&D is working on today as we talk about Artemis?
Yeah, thanks, Bettina. When we look at sustainable presence, well, we try to get ourselves in a position by the end of the decade that what we can do is a couple things. One is that we've enabled platforms and infrastructure, if you will, so that a commercial or another entity can carry on past the point where we've developed. And another way we look at it is since the moon is a great proving ground for us for Mars, is have we done the activities that we are planning to do here that can really help us to get to Mars? And so it's things like have we enabled enough of in situ resource utilization development, so that we can understand how to capture and water ice from the lunar surface, and use that for propellants or life support or other activities. And the other volatiles that are in regolith and stuff. Have we overcome and understood dust mitigation? Can we operate in the extreme environments that are places where we really want to venture, and have access to those? And have we started living off the land and developing things for excavation construction? And Gateway is a great platform also for a couple of things that we kind of learn how we're operating in space. It's a great next step for things like autonomous operations in the environment of the moon, learning how to operate things when crew is not present, or we have less ground interaction, we have less logistics capability. So to us, it's a platform that we're trying to prepare for a condition when we get to the late 2020s.
Thank you, Jim. Our next question comes from Jackie Waddles of CNN.
Hey, folks. Thanks so much for doing this. My question's for Administrator Bridenstine. I was just curious. I know it's been a while since we talked in depth about budget, so snowballing off Irene's question, I was curious if you could preview for us, how you're going to make the case to the Senate subcommittee and to Congress more broadly, why timeline is important and why you think it's important to meet that, given, the broader spending around the pandemic, et cetera.
Yeah, so I mean the history of NASA is billions of dollars being spent on programs that get canceled, and we look at the vision for space exploration of the early 2000s, which was the plan to go to the moon and onto Mars with the Constellation program. We go back to the 1990s. We had the Space Exploration Initiative. Again, it was a plan to go to the moon and onto Mars, and it got canceled. Well, there's a number of different risks when you deal with human space flight. NASA is really, really good at dealing with the technical risk. We have no challenges, developing the technology and the capability to get to the moon and onto Mars. The challenge that we have is the political risk, the programs that go too long, that cost too much, and that end up getting cast out later later in the development program. So to save money and to reduce political risk, we want to go fast. And yeah, we put a very aggressive timeline. 2024 is an aggressive timeline. Is it possible? Yes. Does everything have to go right? Yes. So we are targeting that right now to achieve that goal. So I would say that that the reason we go fast is, number one, the longer a program, and a lot of people don't understand this, but when you take a program and you spread it out with flat budgets, it actually costs a whole lot more than if you allow the program to develop under its normal development cycle, which is normally the shape of a bell curve. So by allowing, for example, the human landing system to be accelerated, we actually drive down costs. We make it more sustainable, and we enable we enable it to be achieved. My goal is to make sure that we can get to the moon by 2024 and that we're sustainable by the end of the decade. And I think that we're on track to achieve those items.
Thank you, Jim. Our next question will be Joy Roulette of Reuters.
Hey, thanks for doing this. This question's for anyone, really. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about the progress with the lunar surface spacesuits and whether management and development of those suits will stay in-house at JSC or if NASA plans to contract that out at any point. Thanks.
So, Kathy,
I can take that. Yeah.
It's all yours.
I got it. Okay. So I actually think
the development of the spacesuit is a really a good story because we've been using our multiple platforms, station, the need for upgraded suits on station, the need for suits that support a lunar platform, and then surface suits. And we've been individually and gradually working that development over many years. And so the team's actually in the process of putting together a prototype that will be able to, in a short period of time, be able to try out first from a station platform perspective and be able to check it out. And then have actually taken a lot of the lessons learned that we learned from the lunar or from the Apollo missions and mobility and other kinds of things, and then are also using that as in different kinds of testing environments to check out the upgrades. So right now the goal is to continue to build that in-house, but while we're going through the prototype process and working through and looking at upgrades and checking it out on station, but that doesn't mean that over a period of time as things are and we're able to evolve it, that at some point in time it may go out from a commercial procurement standpoint. But right now we're going to continue to keep it at the low levels and be able to advance the development in-house.
Thank you, Kathy. Our next question comes from David Curley of Discovery.
Thank you. Administrator, you mentioned the funding hoping to get in December and March becomes problematic. If you don't get it in March, what are the scenarios? Push the date, bigger picture about the program. I know you don't like to think about that, but what are you thinking?
Well, I can tell you that it's really simple. If Congress doesn't fund the moon landing program, then it won't be achieved. I mean, it's really that simple. Now, I want to be clear: if they push the funding off, our goal will be to get to the moon at the earliest possible opportunity. Speed is still of the essence, and sustainability follows speed. So what I would tell you is, if they keep delaying the funding, we will go to the moon at the earliest possible opportunity.
Thanks, Jim. Our next question. Sorry.
No, it's all right. But I do want to emphasize that I think I'm confident based on the communications I've had with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, House members and senators, and I've done town halls with members of Congress with their constituents, virtual town halls these days. Of course, last August I was traveling the country, but recently I've been doing all these town halls virtually with members of Congress and senators on both sides of the aisle about the Artemis program, and I will tell you that there is broad consensus that it is time to go to the moon sustainably, and 2024 is achievable, and we're working towards that. And I just want to be clear that I really think that when the omnibus appropriation is complete, when that omnibus appropriation is complete, I really believe there will be $3.2 billion for a human landing system. That could be at the end of the year, and it could be in March. Right now, what I'm seeing is it's going to be a short-term CR that expires at the end of the year, which means I'm going to communicate as robustly as I can that we would like to see the human landing system fully funded in that appropriation at the end of the year.
Okay, we're going to do one last question, and we're going to round this out with Marcia Smith.
Thank you so much. And following up on that thread of what happens if you don't get the money, just in case you don't, since these are public-private partnerships, have you given any thought to, or have you had any discussions with the companies to see if they might put in more of their own money, since some of these companies are owned by very wealthy individuals? And what percentage are they putting in now? Is there a way to increase that percentage?
So, Marcia, that's a wonderful point you're making. And by the way, a big reason that the 2024 moon landing is possible is because companies have been thinking about this, and they have been making their own plans and investing their own resources. So the idea that with a public-private partnership, the companies themselves could actually step up to the plate in a bigger way, that is something that needs to be seriously considered. I certainly, our goal is to create the plan that best optimizes our ability to land on the moon by 2024. But certainly, if the money doesn't materialize, could they do it with their own resources? I'll leave it to them to make that determination. But Kathy, did you want to maybe have a comment on this?
No, I mean, the only thing I would add is, that is absolutely within the ability for the companies to come in under, the procurement option we have. So what I would say is we're really looking forward to seeing those proposals, right? And seeing the capabilities that are being proposed to us and the opportunities that they will provide for us. Like Jim said, I've seen what cargo providers can do for us, and I've seen what industry has done with their crew capabilities. And I'm looking forward to see what industry will do with a human lander system proposal.
Well, thank you, Marcia, and thank you for everyone that participated in today's call. That's been a great discussion about the Artemis plan, but now that's going to wrap things up for us today. As a reminder, a copy of our Artemis plan is available online at nasa.gov/Artemis. Before we go, I also wanted to encourage you to tune into NASA TV tomorrow at 9:30 a.m., September 22nd. The NASA administrator will announce some exciting news about our collaboration with the U.S. Space Force. So hope to see or hear from you all tomorrow, and have a good evening. Thank you.
This concludes today's conference. All participants may disconnect at this time.